Hi friends, welcome back. Today we're talking about the properties of squares, and a square is a type of quadrilateral, which is a parallelogram, which is also a rectangle and a rhombus. So go back, watch those previous videos because you're going to want to know the properties of all of those. If you have a parallelogram that is both a rectangle, meets the properties of both a rectangle and a rhombus, that is called a square. That is called a square. So let's talk about that. Grab your notebook because, of course, writing everything down in your notebook will help. So looking at these, we have some rhombi and rectangles are squares. Once you have decided a parallelogram is either a rectangle or a rhombus, check to see if it is a square. And how you would do that is, if it's a rectangle, check to see if it's also a rhombus. If they are both, then it is a square. If you have a rhombus, check to see if it's a rectangle. If you have both, again, it is a square. So the squares, all the properties of a parallelogram, rectangle, and rhombus. Just as a friendly reminder for the rectangle and rhombus, the angles, you're going to have right angles. The sides, they're going to be congruent. The diagonals are going to be perpendicular, bisect the opposite angles, and they are going to be congruent. So maybe let's write all of this down so that you can see it in our example right here. So if we have our angles are going to be right angles. So here's all our angles. These are going to be right angles right in here. Okay, and so then we know the sides are also congruent. So this is going to match this, which is going to match this, which is going to match this. The diagonals are perpendicular, so that's important because that also tells us that we have a right angle. And they bisect the opposite angles, which means these right angles right here are bisected. Bisected just means cut in half, so these 90-degree angles here are cut in half to be 45-degree angles all the way around here. 45 here, 45 here. What that means is, because if this is 45 and this is 45, whoops, I put 450 there. If those are both 45, if you remember back to when we talked about isosceles triangles, and that, I just totally messed that up, so ignore that right there. This is 45 degrees right in there. Isosceles triangles, remember, if you have two angles of a triangle that are the same, then the sides opposite those angles are also the same. So this is going to be the same as this, which talking about those diagonals, they are congruent. So this whole long thing is congruent, and they are all congruent to each other. Let me make these two dashes because they're not necessarily congruent to the side here. So let's take a moment and practice the properties of squares. All right, so grab your notebook, draw a square, and let's talk about this right here. So quadrilateral FAST is a square. We know FM is 2 plus 4x. And we know that MS is 8 plus 3x. Find the value of AT given this information. Okay, so let's take a minute and write that all down. Again, looking at our properties of squares, we know that our diagonals are congruent to each other. They're bisected, and which means that they're congruent to each other. So what I can say is this guy is going to be equal to this guy right here. So we say 2 plus 4x equals 8 plus 3x. Let's go ahead and solve this for x by subtracting 3x from both sides and subtracting 2 from both sides. That gives us x equals 6. Now this is geometry. Two things, we never assume anything. And secondly, we always go back and read the question to make sure we're answering it correctly. This says find the value of AT. Well, let's go look. AT is this whole diagonal here. Well, AT is not 6. X is 6. So what we need to do is let's plug x into either one of these. Because they are congruent, it doesn't matter which one. So if we do 2 plus 4x, and remember x equals 6, we get 2 plus 4 times 6. So 2 plus 24 gives me 26. So 2 plus 4x, that's this little chunk right here. We have determined that that guy is 26. If this is 26, then that also means this is 26. Together, if we add those two together, we get 2 carry the 1, we get 52. So we now know that this whole diagonal right here is 52. Because this diagonal is 52, this diagonal, which is congruent to the other diagonal, is also going to be 52. So AT equals 52. AT equals 52. If you have any questions, let your teacher know. Otherwise, great work, and we'll see you next time.